3,000.
Wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in once again. Appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to do that. It keeps me motivated. Yeah, I see that you guys are interested in viewing the videos. Thank you for that. Today we're just gonna continue with a very interesting, topic. We've done a lot of videos on this, and it's regarding the ancient giants of America, right? Especially all these skeletons being found in the mounds and all these digs and archaeological discoveries that was swept under the rug by institutions like the Smithsonian and others. We're gonna just continue reading where we left off in two books that we were reading. That's what we're gonna get into today. All right. Hope you guys enjoy a lot of great information, a lot of very interesting, revealing information that they will call it. Oh, that's fake. People try to disregard it, but we have the sources you guys can verify, and all these people can't just be lying all these years, all these different places in North America. You're gonna see what I'm saying when we're reading these reports. Thanks for being here. Let's go ahead and get started, okay? So we're gonna continue to finish these books we've started reading, especially in the previous giant videos. We're gonna pick up where we left off. The first book we're gonna read, as we've been reading, is this book right here, The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, The Missing Skeletons in the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up by Richard J. Dewhurst. Over on page 129 of this book, we have a figurine here. It says 4.6, toucan illustration from Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley by Ephraim Squire and Edwin Davis. So letting you know that the mound builders of the Mississippi Valley encountered toucans, or toucan, right? It's supposed to be a tropical animals, South America, Central America. But they were up there, or they were trading with people from Central America who had these depictions. It says here, first person account of the 1883 opening of the South Charleston Mound by Charles Connor. Charleston Daily Mail, April 7th, 1952. And looking at the history of the South Charleston Mound, it turns out our best source is A.R. Sines, grandfather of Dr. F.A. Sines, Charleston dentist. Mr. Sines, who died in 1937, had a written account of his part in the mound opening published in the 1920s. No doubt among the thousands of people who daily pass the large mound at South Charleston, many have often wondered if there is anyone living who can tell what is lying or once lay at the bottom of that pile of earth. I am probably the only man now living who stood at the bottom of this mound and assisted with a thorough examination of every foot of its interior from top to bottom in November of 1883, employed by the Smithsonian in 1883. All right, so this guy was working for them to help in the excavation by Colonel P.W. Norris, an old Indian scout who was then in the employ of the Smithsonian Institution of Washington. Colonel Norris, former superintendent of the Yellowstone National Park, was investigating all mounds of West Virginia, Ohio, and nearby states at that time. In opening the mound, the men under Colonel Norris' supervision first leveled off the top, then dug a round hole 10 feet in diameter downward. As they progressed toward the bottom, they dug out a series of shelves around the sides to have place to throw the dirt. 4 feet from the bottom, we made our first discovery. We came upon a large bed of charred wood, something resembling charred bones, and many small pieces, which were more intact, resembling burnt teeth. This had beyond a doubt, once been a funeral pyre. The decayed, the decayed bones belonged to what once had been a most powerful man. There was but little left, but the distance from the spot where the heel bone was found to what was left of the skull was 6 feet, 8 3/4 inches. The shoulder bones were considerably broader than those of men of our present race. Although the skull bone was not so large, the teeth were larger than those we have today. The front part of the skull was nearly double the thickness of a human skull today. A copper crown and a queen. All right, copper crown. Signs and Colonel Norris found a copper band around the forehead of this buried giant, and similar copper bands around the wrists and ankles. With no copper nearer than Tennessee, they assumed it had been carried here by these mound builders thousands of years ago. They also found axe-shaped stones grooved in the middle. Signs related that this stone was not familiar to this country, and so hard that steel would not make a dent. 2 miles down here, where Sunset Memorial Park is today, signs related they opened a smaller mound and located the bones of what appeared to be the remnants of a woman. There were copper bands on the ankle and wrist bones and larger pieces of copper on each breast. As it says here in figure 4.7, a sacramental pipe in the shape of a human. Illustration from Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley by Ephraim Squire and Edwin Davis. And again, that was a Smithsonian expedition. Grave Creek Mound, West Virginia. All right, here we go again on Grave Creek Mound. We have a really good video about copper crown queens, giant queens there with pearls and everything decked out. And also the Bat Creek tablet, the inscription, which is Paleo Hebrew, they found in this mound. Remember that, guys. The best known mound and the largest in the Ohio Valley region is the Grave Creek Mound at Moundsville. This mound was purchased by the state in 1908. Part of the necessary funds was raised by school children. It is now a public park and is maintained by prisoners of the penitentiary. It is located directly opposite the walls of the state prison. You guys hear that? It was discovered by Joseph Tomlinson in 1772. So how can he discover it? There was people there way before that. 2 years prior, this pioneer had built his cabin near the site of now famous burial ground. Around it, he noted a number of smaller mounds. The largest of the group was 69 feet in height and about 900 feet in circumference at the base. On it were huge oak trees that indicated that the mound had been built many years before it was discovered by European men. It says here, The Moundsville Giants by Patricia Cantley. Raleigh Register, June 19th, 1963. The largest of the prehistoric remains in the state is the Grave Creek Mound at Moundsville in Marshall County. It looks about 900 feet around at the base and is 69 feet high. When the mound was opened in 1883 by inexperienced workmen, a burial vault was discovered. It contained 2 compartments, one in the center of the mound on a level with the surrounding land and the other about halfway to the top. In each compartment were found skeletons, 2 in the lower and 1 in the upper. Each skeleton was surrounded by ivory beads and other ornaments of various kinds. One skeleton was covered by thin pieces of mica. It was claimed there was also found a stone tablet near the upper compartment, on which were inscribed characters that resembled ancient hieroglyphics. This is what we're talking about, and it's not claimed. This is official, guys. Bat Creek stone, Bat Creek, all right, Paleo Hebrew. That's what they're talking about. Hieroglyphics, Paleo Hebrew. The second largest mound in the state is in the center of the South Charleston. When it was excavated in 1883 by scientists from the Smithsonian Institution, a giant skeleton about 7 feet tall was found in what appeared to be a vault in the center of the mound. Around the skeleton were numerous ornaments. Pieces of mica on the shoulders appeared to be epaulets, and a large piece of copper on the chest seemed to be a shield. At each of the 4 corners of this vault were skeletons. It says here Salem, professor discovers huge skeletons and mounds. Dr. Sutton believes tribe of giants once inhabited Charleston, Gazette, June 15, 1930. June 14th, excavation of two mounds near Morganville in Doddridge County, about 11 miles west of here, revealed what Professor Ernest Sutton, head of the history department of Salem College, believes as valuable evidence of a race of giants who inhabited this section of West Virginia more than 1,000 years ago. All right, that's not very far, that's not long ago. Professor Sutton revealed tonight that he had been excavating the two mounds for the past several months. Skeletons of four mound builders. All right, these are the mound builders, indicating they were from 7 to 9 feet tall, have been uncovered. From 7 to 9 feet tall, guys. Professor Sutton believes they were members of a race known in the anthropology as Siouan Indians. Siouan, huh? The best preserved skeleton was found enclosed in a casting of clay. All the vertebrae and other bones, except in the skull, were intact. Careful measurement of the specimen indicated it was a man 7.5 feet tall. Continuing, it says here, largest mound opened. The largest mound was excavated in 1883 by A.B. Tomlinson. A tunnel led 10 feet high and 7 feet wide was driven on the level of the ground toward the center. At a distance of 111 feet, the workmen discovered a vault 12 feet long, 8 feet wide, and 7 feet deep. It had been sunk in the earth before the mound was erected. The vault had been erected by placing upright timbers along each side, and along the ends which supported timbers that formed the ceiling. The top of the vault was then covered with rough stones. With the decay of the timbers, the stones and dirt had fallen into the vault. And here's a figurine that says, this find of a 9-foot skeleton, guys. Listen, look, the real picture from the Smithsonian's expedition, right? A 9-foot skeleton right here in Indiana was shipped to the Smithsonian, where it immediately went into the memory hole. All right. Now we already know what happens in that famous Smithsonian vault. Everything disappears. That's what their job was. Yeah, they did these excavations and brought the anthropologists and all that. But their job was to grab these things and hide them or destroy them before people saw them, before history was able to write about them. Here is a 9-foot skeleton, guys, in Indiana, a real giant. We're not talking about myths. We're not talking about just biblical stories. This is real. This is the biblical land. This is the ancient world of the antediluvians. Yes, people were a lot bigger. When the stones were removed, 2 skeletons were found. Surrounding one of them were 656 ivory beads, and nearby was an ivory ornament about 6 inches long. There were no ornaments on the other skeleton. 1,700 ivory beads and 5 copper bracelets made for a king. Then an excavation was done from the top of the mound to connect with the tunnel. About the center of the shaft, another vault was discovered that contained a single skeleton. This person must have been one of great importance because he was surrounded by many ornaments. 1,700 ivory beads, 500 seashells, about 150 pieces of obsidian glass, and 5 copper bracelets on the wrist. More heavily debated hieroglyphics. In the second vault, about 2 feet from the skeleton, was found the famous stone that has been the subject of controversy on the part of many antiquarians. Some claim it was a hoax. On it were certain characters, sort of hieroglyphics, and it was hoped by some that it would prove to be a sort of Rosetta Stone with a message from an ancient race. All right, you guys understanding what they're saying here? I know some of you not into this might think this is still myth or not real, think this is tabloid. No, this is actual reports. That stone is official. It's in a museum. It's the Back Creek Stone. Look it up. We have videos on it if you want to catch up. It has ancient Paleo Hebrew on it. Hebrew. inscriptions, old world inscriptions on it. It's not a hoax. They found it in here, officially found by the Smithsonian themselves. Nobody buried it in there. It was from the mounds next to the skeleton, right? We're telling you, skeletons that are from 7 to 9 feet tall. Your so-called mound builders with Paleo-Hebrew inscriptions right next to them. Think about that. And here we go to this image. Take a good look at this. So you got rubies, pearls, beads, copper, jewelry. It says here figure 4.9, the beautiful 8-foot queen in all her glory. An 8-foot skeleton of a woman, a queen. Look at this, guys. This is real. We're not talking about myths. This was real. They found this stuff. Originally dug in 1838. The Charleston Daily Mail, 1938. The mound was excavated exactly 100 years ago. The work having been begun on March 19, 1838. The owner and interested neighbor, none of whom were trained antiquarians, did the work. It is possible they overlooked many things that would have thrown light on the life and habits of the mound builders. The ancient giants built a stone wall 8 miles long. Another prehistoric ruin that has been attributed to the mound builders is a stone wall on the hill top above Mount Carbon, about 4 miles east of Montgomery, overlooking the Kanawha River. It was constructed around the brow of the mountain about 300 feet from the summit. It is broken in places, but it is at least 8 miles long. At intervals, there are large piles of stones that indicate that towers or gates were constructed at these points. Ancient hilltop temple. The stones, which were loosely placed together without mortar or cement, are similar to those found at the bottom of the mountain. It was evidently a great task to carry them up the steep hillside. One naturally asks why these walls were constructed. Hardly for defense, because there is no evidence of a habitation. No water is to be found on the mountaintop. The walls are built on the highest mountain in the vicinity, and they have been for temples of worship. Maybe they're attached to a whole big complex pyramid. Maybe that mountain is not a mountain. The Ohio connection. The most important and the most interesting group of mounds erected in West Virginia is found in the vicinity of Charleston. They are distinctive, although they have characteristics similar to the mounds found in Ohio, and have been classified with the latter. The ancient people who lived near Charleston were undoubtedly related to those who lived in Ohio. All right, and that's true. You know, we know a lot of the Eastern Sioux tribes of that area. They came from Ohio. They originated Ohio. The Sioux originated in Ohio, not in the plains, not in the West, in Ohio. And from there they split West and East. So we're actually going to read again another book, which we've been reading as well, regarding giants and all the mounds there, how they found so many giants there as well. So we'll get back into that. So as they're telling you here, there's a connection with the ones in, West Virginia. Ancient king, 4,000 years old, found. San Antonio Express, November 1st, 1936. This summer witnessed the unearthing of a skeleton of a prehistoric Texas man, which has been identified as being from the period of the mound builders. The remains found are estimated to be about 4,000 years old and were located by an expedition from the Department of Anthropology of the University of Texas. The skeleton was found on the old Blanco Road at a point near Klappenbach Hill, just south of New Braunfels. The burial is evidently that of a chieftain or minor king of the mound builder race. Regal artifacts were found near the skeleton to substantiate the theory that this person was of royal birth. King Conehead is discovered. The king of the coneheads, huh? Throughout my research, I ran into reports describing skeletons with deformed, elongated, or flattened skulls, right? Just like the ones in Peru. In almost all the cases where there was more than a cursory description, it turns out that what is being described are what have recently been called coneheads. and a humorous reference to a famous Saturday Night Live sketch and movie, a condition most clearly seen in the famous statue of Queen Nefertiti. All right, you guys know what they're talking about, the elongated skulls. And here's an example of Queen Nefertiti with her elongated skull. You know, that's just a statue. Doesn't mean she lived in that area of the world. They could have been telling a story of the people back in the Americas with the elongated skulls, the real people. And the elongated skulls have been found in Peru. Go check that out. Just Google that, put it on YouTube, search it, you'll see. Brian Forrester, right? He did a whole, video, showing them. So it's interesting that they're telling, Hollywood grabbed this and they started calling them coneheads, make it fun. Now you understand what coneheads really is. Coneheads were these elongated skull, these people with the flattened foreheads. And, as some people showed, they're not just like regular human like today. They're not the same size. When comparing them, they have different eye sockets. Everything's a little bigger. The forehead, it has things that our skulls don't have. So it's not just about deformation when they're babies. It's something else. But let's continue. It says here, traditionally this has been attributed to hydrocephalic deformation or artificial skull boarding techniques. But as the number of these skulls that have been found and studied increases, it is obvious to researchers that certain skulls are naturally oversized, and have increased cranial capacities that are not the result of disease or artificial manipulation. Okay, so it says here, evidence of conehead burial. Charleston Daily Mail, September 23rd, 1923. The removal of a wagon load or so of these stones brought to light a stone vault 7 feet long and 4 feet deep, in the bottom of which was found a large and much decayed human skeleton, but wanting the head, which the most careful investigation failed to discover. A single rough spearhead was the only accompanying object found in this vault. At the depth of 6 feet, an earth similar to that around the base of the mound, was found a second skeleton, also much decayed, of an adult of normal size. At 9 feet, a third skeleton was discovered, a mass of loose, dry earth surrounded by the remains of a bark coffin. This was in a much better state of preservation than the other two. The skull which was preserved was of the compressed or flathead type. In other words, the skeleton exhibited head characteristics similar to those found in South America and Egypt. As digs progressed in other parts of the state, archaeologists in Wheeling, West Virginia found another grouping of giants ranging in height from 6'7" to 7'6", and also displaying unusual skull formations with low foreheads that sloped back gradually. Continuing, it says here, mound builders had peculiar heads. Ancient monuments of the Mississippi Valley. Professor E.L. Lively and J.L. Williamson of Friendly have made an examination of the giants' skeletons found by children playing near the town. The femurs and vertebrae were found to be in a remarkable state of preservation and showed the persons to be of enormous stature. The skeletons ranged in height from 7'6" down to 6'7" inches. The skulls found are of peculiar formation. The forehead is low and slopes back gradually, while the back part of the head is very prominent, much more so than the skulls of people living today. The legs are exceedingly long and the bones unusually large. The finding of the skeletons has created a great deal of interest, and the general impression is that the bones are the remains of the people who built the mounds, the largest in the country being located at Moundsville in Marshall County. Continues as History of Indiana County, 1880. One child of 5 or 6 years had been buried in a stone-lined grave along with 2 infants. They had possibly been victims of an epidemic. All adults were of medium stature. All but one had had deformities of a lesser or greater degree. The most interesting burials were of a woman under 30 and a child of 8 to 10 years in the same grave. Around the neck of the woman were several tiny drilled Gulf of Mexico shells. Whoa, once part of a necklace. The shells are an indication of contact with distant tribes. At the center of her bag was found a highly polished bone tube, having worn areas near each end where strings or thongs had probably been placed. This bone, possibly from a swan, could have been a hair ornament. Around the woman's leg bones were found 1,458 tubular beads cut from birds' long bones. It is surmised that these were fastened to the hem or her skirt. At the foot of the grave was an unusual compound pottery vessel in such good condition that it was easily repaired. It was also found that an intense fire, perhaps of religious significance, had been built directly over the grave. Continuing says here, the horn skull of Sayre, Pennsylvania. Here we go. This is actually a very famous, skull. A lot of people say, "Oh, that's fake," right away, hoax. Who knows? But it's one of those famous images that circles the internet when topic of giants comes up, and devils and all this stuff, right? So again, the horn skull of Sayre, Pennsylvania. Charleston Daily Mail, September 20, 1916, all right? This was really written about, and we've probably got other accounts of this in my newspaper, old newspaper article videos. Shout out to Analog, the archivist. He finds a lot of these articles that we're actually reading right here, the originals. It says Sayre is a borough in Bradford County, Pennsylvania, of Sayre, 59 miles northwest of Scranton. The exact year is not clear, but during the 1880s, a large burial mound was discovered in Sayre. It was reported that a group of Americans uncovered several strange human skulls and bones. The skeletons belonged to anatomically normal men, with the exception of bony projections located about 2 inches above the eyebrows. It appeared that the skulls had horns. The bones were characterized as giant, as they were representative of people over 7 feet tall. Scientists estimated that the bodies had been buried around 1200 AD. The archaeological discovery was made by a reputable group of antiquarians. All right, this is who found them, including Dr. G.P. Donahue, the Pennsylvania State dignitary of the Presbyterian Church. Then you got A.B. Skinner of the American Investigating Museum, and you got W.K. Moorhead of Phillips Academy, Andover, Massachusetts. These are the people who found it. So it wasn't just any farmer or anybody trying to play a prank. That's what they're letting you know. And here it is. This is literally what they're telling you. These people said they found, all right, in Pennsylvania, buried. According to historical accounts, the Sayre horned giant bones were sent to the American Investigating Museum in Philadelphia. The artifacts were later reported missing. All right, all of a sudden it went missing. They were like, no, 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 we can't show this to anybody. What is this, guys? Amazing, right? Is this real? Hey, those people say they found it. This was not the first time that gigantic horn skulls were unearthed in North America, and we actually have shown other accounts and other skulls. And he's right, we've shown it, guys. Make sure to catch up on the videos. There's a lot of articles on horned skulls, gigantic, skulls in North America. During the 19th century, similar skulls were discovered near Wellsville, New York, and in a mining village close to El Paso, Texas. At one time in history, human horns were used as signs of kingship. Alexander the Great was depicted with horns on some of his coins. In Moses' time, horns were a symbol of authority and power. Apparently, pictures of the skulls do exist, but many people claim the discovery to be a hoax. Conversely, many websites suggest that the objects are of extraterrestrial origin. So this is another thing, that they grab it, all the space people and all the alien lovers of aliens and space. They want it to be so real that that has to be an alien. As they can't explain it, so everything they can't explain, people, it has to be extraterrestrial. Huh? But what does extraterrestrial really mean? Extra Earth, extraterrestrial, of the Earth, or extra of the Earth, not from space. And then we got this image says evidence of horns. The Vatican Museum possesses Michelangelo's famous statue of Moses. Look at that with horns. Huh. All right. So we're gonna go to the next book, guys. We'll come back to this book. So now we're gonna continue in this book. Again, we're coming back to this book. We've read a lot from it already. We're gonna finish, reading from it a little bit today. I don't know if we can get all of it today, but we're gonna try to read a good amount. It's called The Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America by Fritz Zimmerman, forward by L.A. Marzulli. We're gonna go where we left off the last time we read this book. So we go to about page 91 of this book. This is actually where we left off last time when we were reading this book. We're on these stone mounds and skeletons of enormous size, it says here. The head of one being the size of a wooden bucket. All right, so we're going to continue right here. It says here, Newark Daily Advocate, May 5th, 1897. Licking County possesses largest stone mound in Ohio. So in this chapter, we've been going through the mounds in Ohio and all the skeletons they found there. All right, we're still in the same chapter. It was a long chapter and we didn't finish it, but continuing, it says here, Professor Warren K. Moorhead of the Ohio State University, who has made several visits to this county on archaeological investigations, contributes the following to the popular science news on Ohio's largest stone mound, which located in this county. Upon a hill in Licking County, overlooking the reservoir, is a famous stone mound. Today is about 10 feet high on the average and covers a diameter something over 200 feet. In 1811, when first noticed, it was 50 or 55 feet high and about 180 feet broad at the base. No similar stone structure and but few earth mounds could compare with it in size and symmetry. When the reservoir was constructed, some 5,000 wagon loads of stone were hauled from it to the rip-rap the walls. No one of the ignorant vandals engaged in this demolition had any conception of the importance of the structure. After 1 or 2 years of active destruction, they reached the bottom of the stones and found 8 or 10 small earth mounds. It seems that the structure had been erected simply to cover these. With thoughts of gold and other riches, several of the tumuli were excavated, and one was found a large skeleton laying in a hollow log. Many beads were strung about the neck. Several copper hatchets lay by the hands, and copper bracelets encircled the wrist. Important as was the find, there is but one slight trace of it remaining at present time. So it says here, Fairmount Church, adjacent to a large burial mound. The large skeletons were found in stone mounds a short distance from this site. That's from the Nephilim Chronicles, another book. His book, Ohio Historical and Archaeological Society Bulletin, 1900. Among the most elaborate and extensive of these works were those on the high hill, the most elevated ground in the vicinity, a short distance north of Amsterdam, near to and in northeasterly direction from the Fairmount Church in Licking Township. These consisted of a circular wall or embankment, now only a few feet high, enclosing an area of about 8 acres. On the outside of this wall is a ditch 8 or 10 feet in width, which was made by throwing the earth out to make the embankment. These works have been plowed over many times and are gradually disappearing. Within this enclosure there stood, near its center, and within 100 feet of each other, 3 mounds, 2 being of stone. One of the stone mounds had a diameter of at the base of 45 feet, and the other 2 mounds of 30 feet. All were about 20 feet or 25 feet in height. The 2 stone mounds were removed many years ago by Dr. John Cover, who found in the large one some skeletons within 3 feet of the surface of the ground, which must have belonged to persons of very large size. The stone in these mounds were not of a large size, and the earth after their removal was very black, and gave indications of the presence of fire before and soon after. The commencement of the mounds, perhaps upon the first layer of stone, or more likely upon altars which had been erected and upon which sacrifices had been offered as an act of worship, as was the practice of some ancient nations, like the old world, right? It says here, Madison County. Much of the mound on the north bank of the Big Darby River was destroyed during the excavation, but it is still visible in the county park. So it says History of Madison County, Ohio, 1915. Another burial mound is located on the north bank of Big Darby, about 1 mile northwest of Plain City. And as this territory originally belonged to Madison County, it will be proper to mention it briefly here. It was originally about the same size of the larger mound in Jefferson Township, but is much smaller today. In 1848, a society called the Rectifiers was organized in Plain City, the object of which was the improvement of morals, the advancement of education, benevolence and institutions of charity, and the development of archaeological history. In 1850, the society opened this mound from which they took the remains of some skeletons. The thigh bones were very massive, while the jaw bones were sufficiently large to slip over the face of the ordinary man, demonstrating that the beings to whom they belonged must have been of extraordinary size and proportions. The teeth were found in an almost perfect state of preservation and belonged to persons of full growth and well-developed maturity. It is not understood that there was anything else of interest found here, but this, like all other burial mounds, bore the same evidence of the prehistoric age. It says here, Marion County. The history of Marion County, Ohio, 1883. As we see, evidence for the occupation of this region before the appearance of the red man and the European race is to be found in almost every part of the country, as well as through the Northwest generally. In removing the gravel bluffs, which are numerous and deep, for the construction and repairs of roads, and in excavating cellars, hundreds of human skeletons, some of them giant form, have been found. A citizen of Marion County estimates that there were about as many human skeletons in the knolls of Marion County as there are European inhabitants at present. It says here, Meigs County. Large burial mound located in Meigs County, Ohio. Pioneer history of Meigs County, Ohio, 1908. Rutland Township was a large mound on a hill near the center of Section 7. It was 12 feet high, and the bones of a very large man were found there. Miami County. A horseshoe-shaped henge is located north of Piqua, Ohio. 8 additional earthworks once surrounded this one, but were all obliterated by urban sprawling farming. They destroyed mounds that were there, 8 of them, guys. All right, around here. Says Chicago Herald, April 15th, 1904. Find skeleton of giant. Interesting relic of ancient mound builders uncovered in Ohio. A giant skeleton of a man has been unearthed on the Wolverton farm, a short distance from Tippecanoe City, Ohio. It measured 8 feet from the top of the head to the ankles. All right, 8 feet. The feet being missing. The skull is large enough to act at a helmet over the average man's head, or as a helmet. That's how big the skull is. This skeleton was one of 7 buried in a circle. The feet all being toward the center. Rude implements were near the skeleton, are thought to be those of the mound builders. And it continues saying Monroe County. History of Monroe County, Ohio, 1882. When Chester Bishop was digging a cellar for Asahel Booth, a Clarington, many years ago, he came across a skeleton, the bones of which were removed carefully by Dr. Richard Kirkpatrick. And from his measurements, the height of the man when living would have been 8 feet and 5 inches. It is probable that these were the bones of the big Indian, of whom the Indian at Jackson's told me. All right? Remember Tuscaloosa, right? He was a giant, the Black Warrior. Montgomery County. The Miamisburg Mound is the largest in Ohio with a height of 70 feet. The Historical Collections of Ohio, 1881, Miamisburg Mound. Digging into the top of it, he uncovered a few bones at about 10 or 12 feet from the surface. When he became frightened by a hollow sound of his pick, he stopped the work there. But the bones were preserved by Dr. Treon and were of enormous size, a jawbone slipping easily over those of the largest man, flesh and all. Mansfield Daily Shield, November 25th, 1904. Giants' skeletons. Dayton, Ohio, November 26. The skeleton of a human giant was found in the gravel pit east of the city by W.C. Fry, the owner of the pit. He found it measured about 9 feet in length. The skull was 6 times larger than that of an average Caucasian. Professor Metzler and Forsty of the Steele High School believe the bones are those of a member of the primeval race. The Daily Guernsey Times, August 8th, 1905. Giant skeleton. Dayton, Ohio, August 7th. In the gravel pits in the vicinity of Dayton, several giant skeletons have been unearthed. The most interesting was that discovered in the pit at Edgar's Woods. The bones were those of a man of abnormal growth, the skeleton being remarkable for the great length of the arms, the left having been used as pillow for the head when the body was buried. The skeleton had probably been in the ground for centuries, as the bones crumbled when exposed to the air. And over in Morgan County, says here the Athens Messenger, Athens, Ohio, July 4th, 1878. A Homer Township mound opened. We obtained from Mr. Lewis of Homer Township, a gentleman whose statements may be implicitly relied on, the following information concerning the recent opening of a mound in Homer Township. The mound in question is on the Jonathan Petticourt farm, now owned by Mr. Jas Carpenter. It is or was about 30 feet in diameter and almost 6 feet in height, induced to do so throughout mere curiosity. Mr. Carpenter hitched his team to a road scraper a few days since and began the work of moving the earth of which the mound is comprised, and which was so soft and loose that nothing more than a scraper was needed for the work. After about 2 feet of the top had been taken off, a basin-shaped vault 4 feet in depth was discovered. The side of the vault was hard and smooth dressed, and in the bottom was found considerable quantity of ashes, showing that fire had been used in its construction. But the most startling discovery was that of no less than 9 skeletons packed in around the rim of this basin. They were placed with their faces downward, and in tiers of 3 in one place, 3 in another, and 2 in another, while the boss lay off by himself. Then there was this peculiarity: on top of each skeleton, and extending from the head down over the body to the extremities, was a large flat dressed stone, which on being removed showed the skeleton entire. The bones were in a good state of preservation when first exposed to the air, but on an attempt to remove them, departed at the articulations, otherwise they are about like those seen in the office of the physicians. One thigh bone measured 18.5 inches in length. Carpenter has the whole lot piled up like stove wood. Curiosity seekers are beginning to carry away portions of the skeletons. The skull of the boss, who lay alone, is very large. The lower jawbone will go over that part of a living man's corpus without touching it. The teeth found in the skull were sound as a dollar. The neighborhood boys have about all tried their hands in extracting them until not more than 2 or 3 are left. But the most singular thing of all is that a perfect horn, listen to this, a horn, right, just like in the other book, a perfect horn pointing forward and downward grows out of this skull just back of the ear on the left side. Mr. Parsons says, if you don't believe me, come and see. The horn is about 1.5 inches long. Through lack of care, the right side of this skull was mashed to pieces in the place where the horn ought to have been found. So, on both sides, horns, huh? Mr. Parsons told us a good many other interesting things about this wonderful mound and its dead, and then gave it as his opinion that the skeletons belonged to a race of people of greater antiquity than the ancestors of the Red Devils, calling them devils, who are making such a row up in the Northwest just now. Humph, we call this the New World. Wouldn't it be better to call it the Old One? There you go. Body bag illusion. Ha! He's even saying in their time, why are they calling this the New World? This is the Old World actually. It is on this continent alone that such cemeteries, as has just been described, are found. Nowhere else in the world, guys. I mean, they found giants other places, but not like this, guys. Cemeteries full of them, mounds full of them. There are other mounds in Homer, like unto this one just opened. And it is not unlikely that they will be examined in the future. And with more care, by the way. No kind of implements was found save those, which were made out of stone. Of these there were a variety. Who are these mound builders? That's the question. Continuing, says here, Ohio Science Annual, 1898. A rare archaeological discovery has been made near Reinersville in Morgan County, Ohio. A small knoll, which had always been supposed to be the result of uprooted tree, was opened recently and discovered to be the work of mound builders. Just below the surrounding surface, a layer of boulders and pebbles was found. Directly underneath this was found the skeleton of a giant 8 feet 7 inches in height. Surrounding the skeleton were bone and stone implements, stone hatchets, and other characteristics of the mound builders. The discovery is considered by the scientists as one of the most important ever made in Ohio, okay? A giant of 8 feet 7 inches tall, almost 9 feet. The discovery, again, very important. Very important. The skeleton is now in the possession of Reinersville collector. Why are they holding on to this, huh? Going over to Monroe County. History of Monroe County, Ohio, 1880. In 1829, when the hotel was built in Chesterville, a mound nearby was made to furnish the material for the brick. In digging it away, a large human skeleton was found, but no measurements were made. It is related that the jawbone was found to fit easily over that of a citizen of the village, who was remarkable for his large jaw. The local physicians examined the cranium and found it proportionately large, with more teeth than the European race of today. The skeleton was taken to Mansfield and has been lost sight of entirely. Smithsonian probably got their hands on it, huh? And we head over to Muskingum County again. This is just going over in Ohio. Check out the previous parts of my Giants video. It's so many discoveries here in Ohio. The Phrenological Journal and Science and Health, 1880. The discovery or giant remains in Ohio. A correspondent of the Cincinnati Enquirer, in describing the mound in which the gigantic skeletons lately found in Muskingum County, Ohio, were deposited, says it was about 64 feet long and 35 feet wide, top measurement, and gently sloped down to the hill where it was situated. A number of stumps of trees were found on the slope, standing in 2 rows, and on the top of the mound were an oak and a hickory stump, all of which bore marks of great age. All of the skeletons were found on a level with the hill and about 8 feet from the top of the mound. In one grave there were 2 skeleton tons, 1 male and 1 female. The female face was looking downward, the male being immediately over, with the face looking upward. The male skeleton measured 9 feet in length, okay? 9 foot giant, and the female was 8 foot. In another grave were also found 2 skeletons, male and female, with the female face looking upward and the male face looking downward. The male frame was 9 feet 4 inches in length, and the female 8 feet. All right, you guys hear this? In another grave was found a female skeleton, Ton, which was encased in a clay coffin, holding in her hands the frail skeleton of a child 3 feet and a half long, by the side of which was an image, which upon being exposed to the atmosphere crumbled rapidly. 7 others were found in single graves and lying on their sides. The smallest of the 7 was 9 feet in length, and the largest 10. One single circumstance connected with this discovery was, sorry, one single circumstance connected with this discovery was the fact that lit a single tooth was found in either mouth, except in the one encased in the clay coffin. On the south end of the mound was erected a stone altar, 4 feet and a half wide and 12 feet long, built on earthen foundation, nearly 4 feet high, having in the middle 2 large flagstones, upon which sacrifices were undoubtedly made. Well, why undoubtedly? That's the hijack. For upon them were found charred bones, cinders, and ashes. This was covered by about 3 feet of earth. This excavation was made under the direction of the Muskingum County Historical Society, so they can't say, hey, it was hoaxers or they're lying or they didn't find it there. It was their own historical people, local people doing it. And the thing alluded to in this letter or dispatch can be verified by a number of witnesses who were present and watched the work as it progressed. It was pursued with great interest and diligence, there being the strongest incentive to prosecute the investigation for such remarkable developments in mound opening are very rare. So excuse for some of the reading because some of the typing when they type this Kindle version is not very good. You see, as you see here, it says arc, but it means he's trying to say are very rare, and are therefore fascinating in the extreme. Their future labors were also rewarded with additional developments, which if they do not throw additional light upon this giant race of people that once inhabited this country, will at least stimulate research. What is now a profound mystery, the result of this excavation may in time become the key to unlock still further mysteries that centuries ago were commonplace affairs, and a stone that was found resting against the head of the clay coffin above described. It is an irregular shaped red sandstone weighing about 5 pounds, being strongly impregnated with oxide of iron, and bearing upon one side 2 lines of hieroglyphics. Again, they're saying hieroglyphics. They said hieroglyphics earlier when they were talking about the Bad Creek stone. That was Paleo Hebrew. So we just talking about old world inscriptions and these stones they're finding in the mounds. We got numerous videos on this, right? Continuing, it says American Antiquarian, Volume 3, 1880. A skeleton which is reported to have been of enormous dimensions was found in a clay coffin with a sandstone slab containing hieroglyphics during mound explorations by Dr. Everhart near Zanesville, Ohio. Continuing, History of Muskingum County, Ohio, 1882, the Brush Creek Township. Says here to Dr. F.T. Everhart, A.M. Historian. Dear Sir, on December 1st, 1879, we assembled with a large number of people for the purpose of excavating into and examining the contents of an ancient mound located on the farm of Mr. J.M. Bauman in Brush Creek Township, Muskingum County, Ohio. The mound is situated on the summit of a hill rising 150 feet above the bed of the stream called Brush Creek. It is about 64 feet in width by about 90 feet in length, having an altitude of 11 feet 3 inches. It is nearly flat on the top. On the mound were found the stumps of 16 trees ranging in size from 8 inches to 2.5 feet in diameter. We began the investigations by digging a trench 4 feet wide from the east side. When the depth of 8 feet had been reached, we found a human skeleton, deeply charred, in close proximity to a stake 6 feet in length and found inches in thickness, also deeply charred, and standing in an upright position. We found the cranium, vertebrae, pelvis, and metacarpal bones near, while the femurs and tibula extended horizontally from the stake. At this juncture, work was abandoned on account of the lateness of the hour until Monday, December 8th, when it was resumed by opening the mound from the northwest. When at the depth of 7.5 feet in the north trench, came upon two enormous skeletons, male and female, lying one above the other, faces together, and heads toward the west. The male, by actual measurement, proved to be 9 feet 6 inches. The female, 8 feet 9 inches in length. At about the same depth, in the west trench, we found two more skeletons, lying 2 feet apart, faces upward and heads to the east. These, it is believed, were full as large as those already measured, but the condition in which they were found rendered exact measurement impossible. On December 22nd, we began digging at the southeast portion of the mound and had not proceeded more than 3 feet when we discovered an altar built of sand rock. The altar was 6 feet in width and 12 feet in length and was filled with clay, and of about the same shape that the mound originally was. On the top, which was composed of two flag rocks forming an area of about 2 feet in width and 6 in length, was found wood ashes and charcoal to the amount of 5 or 6 bushels. Immediately behind, or west of the altar, were found 3 skeletons deeply charred and covered with ashes, lying faces upward, heads toward the south, measuring respectively 8 feet 10, 9 feet 2, and 9 feet 4 inches in length, guys. You hear that? Giants. This is what they're finding in these mounds, guys, in North America. How many more do I have to read about? How many people could be lying? It's just so many. Why would everybody be lying? In another grave, a female skeleton 8 feet long and a male skeleton 9 feet 4 inches long. The female, the lowermost, and the face downward, and the male on top, face upward behind the side of the altar. After proceeding about 4 feet, we found within 3 feet of the top of the mound and 5 feet above the natural surface a coffin or burial case made of a peculiar kind of yellow clay, the like of which we have not found in the township. Consequently, we believe it was brought from a distance. Within the casket were confined the remains of a female 8 feet in length, an infant 3.5 feet in length, the skull of which was scarcely thicker than the blade of an ordinary case knife. The skull of the female will average in thickness about 1/8 of an inch, measured 18 3/4 inches from the supraorbital ridge to the external occipital protuberance, was remarkably smooth, perfectly formed. Within the enclosure was a figure or image of an infant but 16 inches in length, made of the yellow clay of which the casket was formed. Also, a roll of peculiar black substance encased in the yellow clay, 12 inches in length by 4 inches in diameter, which crumbled to dust when exposed to the air. We also found what appears to have been the handle and part of the side of a huge vase. It was nicely glazed, almost black in color, and burned very hard. From within a few inches of the coffin was taken a sand rock having a surface of 12 to 14 inches, which had also passed through the fire, upon which were engraved the following described hieroglyphics. Here, a space was left in the notebook for the representation of the inscription found upon the stone, but for the sake of a true representation, we determined to have photographs made and make one a part of this report. Proceeding north about 4 feet from where we found the coffin, and within 6 inches of the top of the mound, we discovered a huge skeleton lying on its face, with the head toward the west. Mr. J. M. Bauman came upon this one accidentally, and as it fell to pieces, he thinks no one could tell how long it was, but those who saw it unanimously declared it to be the largest of any yet discovered. We have found 11 human skeletons in all, 7 of which have been subjected to fire. And what is remarkable, we have not found a tooth in all the excavations. The above report contains nothing but facts, all right? Nothing but facts, briefly told, and knowing that the public has been humbugged and imposed upon by archaeologists, we wish to fortify our own statements by giving the following testimonial. We, The undersigned citizens of Brush Creek Township, having been present and taken part in the above excavations, do certify that the statements herewith set forth are true and correct, and in no particular has the writer deviated from the facts in the case. All right, that was the whole town saying, "Hey, we were there. We saw it. We saw these giants being pulled out. This is real." Signed Thomas D. Showers, John Worstall, Marshall Cooper, J.M. Bauman, S.S. Bauman, John E. McCoy. McCoy, huh? Then we get a McCoy that was coming down from the, all right, Cleopatra, Pocahontas sisters line, huh? All right, so as you guys can see, this stuff is recorded throughout, history. A lot of these things has been brushed under the rug. History of Muskingum County, Ohio, 1882. The mounds are situated on what is known as the Payson Farm and are 6 in number, covering about 20 acres of ground. They are from 10 to 18 feet in height and from 500 to 1,000 feet in circumference. The explorations divulge no hidden treasures so far, but have proved to us that there once undoubtedly existed here a more enlightened race of human beings than that of the Indians who inhabited this country, and whose movements have been traced back hundreds of years. While engaged in excavating one of the larger mounds, we discovered the feet of a large skeleton, and carefully removing the hardened earth which was embedded, we succeeded in unearthing a large skeleton without injury. The human framework measured 6 feet 6 inches in length, and from appearances it was undoubtedly that of a male. In the right hand was a large iron or steel weapon, which had been buried with the body, but which crumbled to pieces on handling. Near the skeleton was also found pieces of a cedar wood, cut in various fantastic shapes, and was also found, and in a state of perfect preservation. The carvings showing that the people of this unknown race were acquainted with the use of edged tools. We also found a large stone pipe, the stem of which was inserted between the teeth of the skeletons. The bowl of the pipe weighs 5 ounces, and it made a sandstone. The aperture for tobacco had the appearance of having been drilled out. We found another skeleton near that of the above mentioned, which was not quite as large. It must be that of a woman. There was neatly carved tombstone near the head of this skeleton. Close by, the floor was covered with a hard cement, to all appearances a part of the solid rock, which after patient labor and exhaustive work, we succeeded in penetrating, and found it was the corner of a box, similarly constructed, in which we found about 3 pints of wheat kernels, most of which was dissolved when brought in contact with the air. A few of the kernels found in the center of the heap looked bright, and retained their freshness on being exposed. These were carefully preserved and last spring planted and grew nicely. They even planted what they found in there and it grew. We raised 4.5 pounds of heads from these grains. The wheat is unlike any other race in this country and produces a large yield. It is the club variety. The heads are very long and hold very large grains. So wheat, ancient American wheat, Did we have wheat here? Continue, says here, Pike County. Several burial mounds are located in the Piketon, Ohio cemetery. So you see they made a cemetery out of this place. The Stevens Point Journal, May 1st, 1886. Prehistoric skeletons. An Ohio county full of valuable relics of the mound builders. It is very evident that in an early day in the history of this country, this section of Ohio was an important camping ground for the American Indian. There are in this country several burying grounds, and 2 of them are located 5 miles west of this city, near Jasper. One on the farm of Mr. William Bush and one on the Mr. Matthew Marks farm. These burying places are both in gravel banks and were discovered when the banks were opened for the purpose of hauling out gravel. In a conversation with a gentleman who has seen a number of skeletons unearthed at the Mark Bank was first opened, Some of these skeletons have been measured, and the largest have been found to be 9 feet long and over. At one time, 10 skeletons were exhumed. They had buried in a circle, standing in an erect position, and were in a comparatively well preserved condition. One remarkable fact about all the skeletons unearthed at these places is the perfect state of preservation in which the teeth are found to be. Not a decayed tooth has been discovered, and this would seem to indicate that these people naturally had excellent teeth or some extraordinary manner of preserving them. The last skeleton taken up was of ordinary length, but the bones were wonderfully large, and a gentleman who examined them says that the backbone was as large as the backbone of a cow. Some think that this may have been a young fellow who had not yet lengthened out. The opinion is held by not a few that these are not the remains of the common Indian, but that they are the last vestiges of a prehistoric race and extinct race, as there are several mounds which were undoubtedly constructed by the mound builders located in this and adjoining counties. The writer, in digging in one of these mounds, discovered a portion of a crumbling earthen crock, flint spearheads, ashes, etc. In the bush, gravel bank trinkets and weapons of warfare of various kinds were discovered lying about the skeletons. All right, so we're gonna come back to the other book real quick, so we can get a little bit of both. Again, the book is The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, The Missing Skeletons, and the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up by Richard Dewhurst. And this time we are going to head over to chapter 2 of this book. It says here, Sophisticated Cultures of the Ancient Giants. Page 142. So I guess it's part 2, chapter 5 says Pyramids and Pictorial Mounds. At the turn of the 20th century, there was a national awareness of the mound builders and their extensive earthworks that far exceeded contemporary consciousness on the subject. Since the majority of the country still lived in an agrarian lifestyle, awareness of the mounds was reinforced by daily contact with the actual sites themselves. Current estimates put the number of known American mounds at well over 100,000. There was a lot more than that, guys. They ranged in shape from the Great Pyramids of Illinois to the fantastic pictorial mounds of Wisconsin. It seemed to be common knowledge that giants were found buried in many of these mounds. It was common knowledge. This is what I'm trying to tell you. And that these giants were not related to the present-day American Indians living in the region. The Great Pyramid Mounds of Illinois. One of the largest of the mound builder sites in North America is located in southwestern Illinois near Collinsville. It is commonly called the Cahokia site. The Cahokia Mound Complex has been compared in scope and grandeur to the Great Pyramid. The site is located at the confluence of the Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers, directly across the Mississippi River from present-day St. Louis. During the Middle Ages, Cahokia was a larger city than London, with an estimated population of 40 to 50,000. Yet today it is an abandoned place, about which we know almost nothing. Centuries ago, there were more than 120 mounds at the Cahokia site, although the location of only 106 have been recorded. Many of them have been destroyed or altered because of modern farming and construction, although 68 have been preserved inside the boundaries of the Cahokia Mound State Historic Site. Lawyer and writer H.M. Breckinridge captured the awe of seeing the Cahokia complex in 1811. He crossed the Mississippi at St. Louis, and after making his way through the woods along the Cahokia Creek, passed over the plain to the mounds. He referred to them as resembling enormous haystacks scattered through a meadow. Continuing, it says Journal of a Voyage Up the Mississippi River in 1811 by Henry Marie Breckinridge. When I reached the foot of the principal mound, I was struck with a degree of astonishment not unlike that which is experienced in contemplating the Egyptian pyramids. What a stupendous pile of earth! To heap up such a mass must have required years and labors of thousands. Pursuing my walk along the bank of the Cahokia, I passed 8 other mounds in the distance of 3 miles before I arrived at the largest assemblage. When I reached the foot of the principal mound, I was struck with a degree of astonishment not unlike that which is experienced in contemplating the Egyptian pyramids. What is stupendous Polar Earth? All right, guys, they're actually repeating this part. Sorry about that. To heap up such a mass must have required years and labors of thousands. It stands immediately on the banks of the Cahokia, and on the side next to it is covered with lofty trees, where it is not for the regularity and design it manifests, the circumstances of it being an alluvial ground, and the other mounds scattered around it, we would scarcely believe it be the work of human hands. The site is named after a tribe of Illiniwek Indians, the Cahokia, who lived in the area when the French arrived in the late 1600s. What the actual name of the city may have been in ancient times is unknown. The modern archaeological site is believed to have existed from AD 700, again believed, they don't know, until its decline in 1300. By 1500, it is thought to have been completely abandoned. As is the case with many of the ancient mound builder sites, a true accounting of the ancient history of the mounds is almost impossible due to the destruction of over half the mounds at the site, coupled with the lack of any modern excavation work that could dig down to the earlier construction at Cahokia. All right, why don't they dig Cahokia, guys? This is very deep, right here. A lot of people think that hey, that might be a real pyramid under there. Why ain't they digging Cahokia, which may be thousands of years earlier than the dates currently assigned by conventional archaeology? Because that's what it would prove, guys. That's why. It says here, Monk's Mound. The largest earthwork in the Cahokia complex is a stepped pyramid, which covers about 16 acres. It is often called Monk's Mound after Trappist monks who farmed the terraces in the early 1800s. It was apparently rebuilt several times in the distant past. At the summit of the mound are the buried remains of some sort of temple, further adding to the mystery of the site. Monk's Mound measures 100 feet tall, with an original base of 1,000 feet. These even measurements in feet have raised the interest of alternative historians, as well as in its numerous astronomical alignments that show great similarities to alignments at Stonehenge and Teotihuacan, among numerous significant ancient sites. All right, yeah, Monk's Mound, Cahokia Mounds, right there, very, very big, very, very large. Monk's Mound, built circa 950 1100 CE, touched the hijack, and located at the Cahokia Mound State Historic Site near Collinsville, Illinois. All right, Little Egypt, Illinois. Mysterious Mound 72. In addition, during the excavation of Mound 72, a ridgetop burial mound south of Monk's Mound, archaeologists found the remains of a man in his 40s buried on a bed of more than 20,000 marine shell disc beads arranged in the shape of a falcon, with the bird's heads appearing beneath and beside the man's head, and its wings and tail beneath his arms and legs. Archaeologists also recovered more than 250 other skeletons from Mound 72. All right, you guys hear that? 250 skeletons. Scholars believe almost 62% of these were sacrificial victims based on signs of ritual execution and method of burial. They don't know that. It says here circular wooden sun calendars called Woodhenge. Some archaeologists believe that the last survivors of the mound builders were the Natchez Indians or the lower Mississippi Valley. These Indians were known for being devout worshippers of the sun, dash the hijack, which may explain the uses of the mounds at Cahokia and the so-called Woodhenge at the site. These 48 wooden posts make up a 410-foot diameter circle, and by lining up the central observation post with specific perimeters posts at sunrise, the exact date of all 4 equinoxes can be determined. Entire books have been written about the many geological and astral alignments associated with the Cahokia complex. Although these studies are dismissed by conventional archaeologists as the wishful thinking of wild-eyed amateurs, what cannot be denied is the amazing similarity between the Woodhenge construction found at Cahokia and the similarly constructed Woodhenge found next to Stonehenge in England. Although these were the finds revealed to the public after the official 1922 excavation, a previous unofficial dig at the site uncovered hundreds more skeletons, some giant in nature, which have all disappeared from the historical record. So even in Cahokia, they found giants there too, guys. So this chapter goes on to talk about Cahokia, a lot, what they found there. As we read a little bit, we're gonna actually continue to get to the part where they're finding the giants, in the mounds. More reports on that. It says here another pyramid found. Ellisburg Journal, 1886. W.H. Scoville of Allegheny and his brother-in-law from Connecticut, while hunting squirrels in the woods towards Irish settlement, found a pyramidal mound 18 or 20 feet long, walled at the base with stone. Grown on it were several trees, some of which were 6 inches through. Mr. Scoville and son Esca exhumed 2 skeletons, one of a dog and one of a tall man about 8 feet in length. Most of the bones perished away when exposed to the air and handled, but the jawbone, as yet, is in Mr. Scoville's possession and is large enough to fit outside his own. Within the last few months, excavations made in Cahokia Mound have brought to light a number of objects made of sheet copper representing helmeted and armored men. They were presumably used for some ceremonial purpose and fashioned very artistically. The Great Mound was formerly surrounded by about 70 lesser mounds, some of them 40 feet high, which had been destroyed by the plow. There was a gigantic earthwork of the kind of 319 feet long and 150 feet wide close to St. Louis, but in the later 1860s, the city grew over it and wiped it out. All right, digging at the time of the destruction disclosed inside of it a huge burial chamber, 70 feet long, built of logs, which contained hundreds of skeletons, which before is telling us they're missing. All these skeletons are missing, guys, and most likely of giants. A little further down, it says giant skeleton found, massive human bones, and Indian relics unearthed near Pelican Lake. New North, Wisconsin, July 23, 1908. That human beings of enormous size inhabited this section of this country ages ago was proven last Sunday, when the massive skeleton of an Indian was unearthed near Pelican Lake. The interesting discovery was made by George Patton and L.H. Eaton, 2 Chicago tourists, who were spending the summer there. For several days, the men noticed a mound on their travels through the woods, and at last, led by curiosity, decided to excavate it. Procuring spades, they fell to work, and after digging down to a depth of about 4 feet, were surprised to find the bones of a large human foot protruding through the earth. Digging further, they gradually uncovered the perfect form of a giant. The skeleton was nearly 8 feet in height, and the arms extended several inches below the hips. Buried with the bones were numerous stone weapons and trinkets. Among these were a curious stone hatchet, a copper knife, several strange copper rings, and a necklace made of the tusk of some prehistoric animal. The skeleton is no doubt that of an Indian who was one of a tribe of giants who roamed this part of the state over 1,000 years ago. Continuing, it says here, railroad workers unearthed giant. An Indian mound opened. Eau Claire Daily Free Press, October 7th, 1873. A few days ago, the men engaged in building the road bed of the Green Bay and Winona Railroad struck an Indian mound near Arcadia. It had been in view for some days, and no little speculation was indulged in as to what the excavation would develop from this cemetery of the Red Man. The discovery exceeded all anticipations. The skeleton of an Indian was found of such dimensions as to indicate that the frame must have been that of a giant. The jawbone easily enclosed the face of the largest laborer to be found on the work. The thigh bones were more like those of a horse than a man, hair heavy and remarkably well preserved. Pieces of blanket in which the body had been wrapped were taken out in intolerable state of preservation. A number of Mexican coins were also found. The unusual size of the skeleton has excited considerable interest, and the curiosities will be carefully preserved for exhibition. Continuing a little further down, it goes over a lot of different mounds and what they're finding, guys. Talking about, so many mounds, thousands and thousands all over, from all over many states, thousands, 20,000s in one area, But just going to the giant part here, it says hundreds of mounds embalmed 9-foot giant and dams. Syracuse Daily Standard, July 23rd, 1897. While men were excavating with a steam shovel near Mora, Minnesota, they found an old copper spear with a point measuring 10 inches in length and tapering to a very fine and tempered point. The weapon shows the maker to have been an adept in working copper metal. Archaeologists believe that at some prehistoric time, the country surrounding Mora was densely inhabited by a race of people who were much further advanced in civilization than the Indians. The many mounds around Fish Lake show that a mighty race of people lies slumbering there, whose history is as yet unwritten, from the mounds of earth which were used as sepulchres for their dead, and which demonstrate beyond a doubt that they were numerous as well as powerful people. Evidence of dams. Two investigators excavating a mound found a skeleton apparently embalmed in a kind of cement, which seemed to be prepared for embalming the dead. The skeleton appeared to be in perfect state of preservation and showed by measurement a height of 9 feet for the individual, who was built in good proportion. As soon as the air struck it, the bones crumbled and disappeared. Taking the country northeast from Fish Lake, where there is a group of 97 mounds, one finds a regular system of dams extending clear to Lake Superior, 100 miles, in which one can see the prehistoric man had a regular means of travel by water from the great city around Fish Lake to Lake Superior and going south by Snake River to the Gulf of Mexico. Guys, hear that? From the Great Lakes. Continuing, it says here giant skulls with perfect teeth. Daily Telegraph, Toronto, Ontario, August 23rd, 1871. Dunnville, Ontario. There is not the slightest doubt that the remains of a lost city are on this farm. At various times within the past years, the remains of mud houses with their chimneys had been found, and there are dozens of pits of a similar kind to that just unearthed, though much smaller in the place which has been discovered before, though the fact has not been made public hitherto. The remains of a blacksmith's shop containing 2 sons of charcoal and various implements were turned up a few months ago. The farm, which consists of 150 acres, has been cultivated for nearly a century and was covered with a thick growth of pine, so that it must have been ages ago since the remains were deposited there. The skulls of the skeletons are of an enormous size and all manner of shapes, about half as large again as are now to be seen. The teeth in most of them are still in almost perfect state of preservation, though they soon fall out when exposed to the air. It is supposed that there is gold or silver in large quantities to be found in the premises, as mineral rods have invariably, when tested, pointed to a certain spot and a few yards from where the last batch of skeletons was found directly under the apple tree. Some large shells supposed to have been used for holding water, which were also found in the pit, were almost petrified. There is no doubt that if there is a scheme of exploration carried on thoroughly, the result would be highly interesting. A good deal of excitement exists in the neighborhood, and many visitors call at the farm daily. The skulls and bones of the giants are fast disappearing, being taken away by curiosity hunters. It is the intention of Mr. Fredenberg to cover the pit up very soon. The pit is ghastly in the extreme. The farm is skirted on the north by the Grand River. The pit is close to the banks, but marks are there to show where the gold or silver treasure is supposed to be under. From the appearance of the skulls, it would seem that their possessors died a violent death, as many of them were broken and dented. The axes are shaped like tomahawks, small but keen instruments. The beads are all of stone and of all sizes and shapes. The pipes are not unlike in shape the cuddy pipe, and several of them are engraved with dogs' heads. You guys hear that? Like Anubis, dogs' heads. They have not lost their virtue for smoking. Some people profess to believe that the locality of the Fredenberg farm was formerly an Indian burial place, but the enormous stature of the skeletons and the fact that pine trees of centuries' growth covered the spot go far to disprove this idea, right? It is old. Continuing, it says here, extra giants found on the New York-Pennsylvania state line. Philadelphia Times, June 27th, 1885. Why, this man was 10 or 12 feet high. Thunder and lightning, exclaimed Mr. Porter in astonishment. All right, he said it was 10 or 12 feet high. The first speaker, who has won local distinction as a scientist, reiterated his assertion. J.H. Porter has a farm near Northeast, not many miles from where the Lakeshore Railroad crosses the New York State boundary line. Early this week, some workmen in Mr. Porter's employ came upon the entrance to a cave, and on entering found heaps of human bones within. Many skeletons were complete, and specimens of the find were brought out and exhibited to the naturalists and archaeologists of the neighborhood. They informed the wondering bystanders that the remains were unmistakably those of giants. The entire village of Northeast was aroused by the discovery, and today hundreds of people from this city took advantage of their holiday to visit the scene. All right, this is a real newspaper report, guys. Philadelphia Times. So far, about 150 giant skeletons, 150 giant skeletons of powerful proportions have been exhumed, and indications point to a second cave eastward, which may probably contain as many more, guys. This is happening in Pennsylvania. You guys heard? Boundary, right? Railroad, state line. 150 giant skeletons found in this cave. There's possibly more. Scientists who have exhumed skeletons and made careful measurements of the bones say that they are the remains of a race of gigantic creatures, compared with which our tallest men would appear like pygmies. These are really tall, 10 to 12 feet high. These are real tall giants. Okay? Continuing, says here Giant Town. The first recorded settlement on that river bottom, Cheat River, was made in 1769, and there was built the fort in which the settlers found shelter during the Denmark War of 1774. The old settlers called the place where the Indian village stood the Giant Town. This was not because the town was larger, but from the fact that the skeleton of a very large man was unearthed at that place about 180 years ago. The fact is as well authenticated as any event can be that depends to some extent on tradition. In the year 1774, or about that time, James Parsons was walking along the riverbank at that place, the Cheat River, and discovered the bones protruding from a bank where a recent flood had washed away the soil. He pulled out the thigh bones of a man, and adjusting the bones to his own leg for comparison, he found that the bone was 7 inches longer than his own. He was 6 feet tall, so this guy's tall, and it still was bigger than him. He pulled out other bones until he had the greater part of a skeleton from the knees upward. The lower jaw bone fitted over the outside of his face. He made a partial reconstruction of the skeleton and was sure the man, when alive, was 8 feet tall. Continuing, it says here a giant race, the Indian mound, Chicasaba. Human skeletons 8 and 10 feet in height, relics of a former race. This is from the Evening Telegraph, September 15, 1870. 2 miles west of Barfield Point in Arkansas County, Arkansas, on the east bank of the lovely stream called Pemiscot River, stands an Indian mound, some 25 feet high and about an acre in area at the top. The mound derives its name from Chicasaba, a chief of the Shawnee tribe who lived, died, and was buried there. This chief was one of the last race of hunters who lived in that beautiful region and who once peopled it quite thickly. Aunt Kitty Williams, who now resides there, relates that Chicasaba would frequently bring in for sale as much as 20 gallons of pure honey and deerskins, bags slung to his back. He was always a friend to the whites, a man of gigantic stature and Herculean strength. He was buried at the foot of the mound on which he had lived by his tribe, most of whom departed for the nation immediately after performing his funeral rites. Chicasaba was perfectly honest and the best informed chief of his tribe. A number of years ago, making an excavation into or near the foot of Chicasaba's mound, a portion of a gigantic human skeleton was found. The men who were digging, becoming interested, unearthed the entire skeleton, and from measurements given us by reliable parties, the frame of the man to whom it belonged could not have been less than 8 or 9 feet in height. under the skull, which slipped easily over the head of our informant, who we will here state is one of our best citizens, was found a peculiar shaped earthen jar resembling nothing in the way of Indian pottery which has before been seen by them. It was exactly the shape of the round bodied, long, naked carafe of water decanters, a specimen of which may be seen on Gaston's dining table. The material of which the vase was made was a peculiar kind of clay, and the workmanship was very fine. The belly or body of it was ornamented with figures or hieroglyphics consistent of a correct delineation of human hands, parallel to each other, open palms outward and running up and down the vase, the wrist to the base, and the fingers toward the neck. Since that time, wherever an excavation has been made in the Chickasaw County, in the neighborhood of the mound, similar skeletons, all right, of giants, right, have been found, and under the skull of everyone were found similar funeral vases, almost exactly like the one described. There are now in this city several of the vases and portions of the huge skeletons. One of the editors of the Appeal yesterday measured a thigh bone which is fully 3 feet long. The thigh and shin bones, together with the bones of the foot, stood up in a proper precision, and a physician's office in this city measured 5 feet in height and showed a body to which the leg belonged to have been from 9 to 10 feet in height. Okay? At Buford's Landing near Garfield, in digging a deep ditch, a skeleton was dug up, the leg of which measured between 5 and 6 feet in length. Just the leg alone, guys, come on. And other bones in proportion. In a very few days, we hope to be able to lay before our readers accurate measurements and descriptions of the portions of skeletons now in the city and of the artifacts found in the graves. It is not a matter of doubt that these are human remains, but of a long extinct race. Continuing, it says here Arizona Giants, El Paso Herald, April 19th, 1950. The skeleton of a giant fully 8 feet tall has been found near Silver City, said H.E. Davis. The thigh bone of this ancient inhabitant of the Southwest measures 2 inches more than the ordinary man. It must have been a giant of great strength. The jawbone is large enough to fit over the jaw of an ordinary man. A peculiarity of the forehead is that it recedes from the eyes like that of an ape. The similarity is still further found in the sharp bones under the eyes. The skeleton was found encased in a baked mud, indicating that encasing the corpse in mud and baking it was the mode of embalming. Near the skeleton was found a stone weighing 12 pounds, which, judging from its shape, must have been a club. The wooden handle has run away, but there are marks on the stone that indicate that it has been bound to a wooden handle with thongs. It is rather peculiar that less than 30 miles from where this skeleton was found and located on the Gal River are the former houses of a tribe of small cliff dwellers. The existence of these two races so near together form an interesting topic. These gorilla-like or monkey-like skulls have been reported in many states several times by Smithsonian personnel. Professor Thomas Wilson, the curator of prehistoric anthropology for the Smithsonian, said the following about the find of an 8 foot 1 inch giant skeleton in Miamisburg, Ohio in 1897. The authenticity of the skull is beyond doubt. Its antiquity is unquestionably great. To my own personal knowledge, several such crania were discovered in the Hopewell group of mounds in Ohio, exhibiting monkey-like traits. I've never really heard of this. But, what is that they're talking about when they mean the flattened foreheads? Interesting sign that we can follow up on. But here you go. That's what they're saying here. Says here, New Mexico discovery, 12-foot giant found. New York Times, February 11, 1902. Owing to the discovery of the remains of a race of giants in Guadalupe, New Mexico, antiquarians and archaeologists are preparing an expedition further to explore that region. This determination is based on the excitement that exists among the people of a scope of country near Mesa Rica, about 200 miles southeast of Las Vegas, where an old burial ground has been discovered that has yielded skeletons of enormous size. Luciana Quintana, on whose ranch the ancient burial plot is located, discovered two stones that bore curious inscriptions, and beneath these were found in shallow excavations the bones of a frame that could not have been less than 12 feet in height or in length. The men who opened the grave say the forearm was 4 feet long and that in a well preserved jaw the lower teeth ranged from the size of a hickory nut to that of the largest walnut in size. The chest of the being is reported as having a circumference of 7 feet. Quintana, who has uncovered many other burial places, expresses the opinion that perhaps thousands of skeletons of a race of giants long extinct will be found. This supposition is based on the traditions handed down from the early Spanish invasion that have detailed knowledge of the existence of a race of giants that inhabited the plains of what is now eastern New Mexico, right? Indian legends and carvings also in the same section indicate the existence of such race. All right, for just this mound, we're going to go back to this book and just read a couple more pages here, going back to what they're finding in Ohio and other mounds around that area in North America. Again, this is the book, The Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America by Fritz Zimmerman. Says here, the Cincinnati Enquirer, July 25th, 1897. Giant skeleton. Found in an Indian mound near Waverly. Waverly, Ohio, July 24th. Professor Moorhead and Assistant Dr. Loveberry of the State University are here opening an Indian mound about the edges of town. So far, 3 have been opened, 2 small ones and 1 large. 1 skeleton was found in each of the first 2 and 3 in the large mound, making 5 skeletons in all. They expect to begin the excavation of a large one on the hill west of town on a day or 2 that is estimated to be 1,000 years older, at least, than the mounds situated in the valley, since it is argued that when the hill mounds were built, the entire Scioto Valley was the channel of an immense river. Discoveries in the hill mounds are looked forward to with much interest. One of the skeletons found in the large valley mound is of tremendous proportions and is concluded to be the remains of a giant specimen of his race. So far, no relics of any kind have been found with the skeleton in the valley mounds. It says here, Preble County, the Osage City Free Press, Osage City, Kansas, November 1st, 1878. Prehistoric bones. Remarkable discoveries of skeletons in Ohio. While men were engaged in digging and hauling from gravel pit located on the Clarence Singer's farm, adjoining Lewisburg, a small place 8 miles north of Eaton, 50 skeletons were unearthed, the first being discovered on last Monday morning, which did not seem to cause any great enticement, for at various times before skeletons had been found in the vicinity of Lewisburg, the pick and shovel were plied more vigorously as the week wore on, while wagon load after wagon load of gravel was hauled away, increasing the number of skeletons to 40 and causing great excitement to prevail at that place, so much so that the citizens quite there daily vocations to gather at the scene of action to form opinions over the strange sight, while large numbers came to the adjoining towns to see the remains of the unfortunate warriors, as the workmen called them. Yesterday, the number of skeletons had increased to 50, as 1 or 2 was unearthed every hour. Who these people were and how their bodies came to be interred in such a strange place is a question which the Lewisburgers would be most happy to have explained. A number of wise heads say they show proof of being the skeletons of Indians, while others claim they are not, as the shape of the skull in most cases does not resemble that of an Indian's in the least. In the same trenches, 5 in number, there were men, women, and children, many of them being very large, as the femur vertebrae, ulna, and radius bones were extraordinarily large, while the phalanges were very long and the skull of good size and thick. There is a very curious fact in regard to the burial of these bodies, as a great many seem to have been buried with their faces downward, and in some cases they were found in a circular position, and in the center of this ring was found a single skull, all of which were baked in a tremendous hot fire, as the clay in which they were burned had been heated to such an extent that the ground for many feet deep was almost calcareous. Many suppose that the skull in the center ring was that of a distinguished chief, and that their curious way of burial was a curious whim of their religious rites, while others think they were mound builders and not Indians, as the remainder of a number of skulls were buried in trenches which radiate from this circular assemblage of skulls. All right, and we go on to Ross County. It says here burial mound in Frankfort, Ohio. All right, that's a mound there. South Kentuckian, August 21st, 1888. A scientist found an Indian mound near Frankfort, Ohio. Friday, two gigantic skeletons clad in curious armor, apparently of bronze. All right, Bronze Age, bronze, giants with bronze in the mounds. Listen, it covered the chest, stomach, and legs, and a narrow band was around his forehead. Various devices were rudely worked on the armor. There were no shields and only two small knives. Archaeologists are puzzled at the discovery. All right, it says here the Ohio Democrat, New Philadelphia, Ohio, November 19th, 1891. A great find of prehistoric remains is made at Chillicothe, Ohio, from an Indian mound. Two men working in the interest of the World's Fair exhumed a skeleton and armor, all right, in the World's Fair, because they were building it, huh? Huge pearls, bear's teeth, and other valuable relics also found a second skeleton discovered. Chillicothe, Ohio, November 17. Warren K. Moorhead and Dr. Cresson, who have been prosecuting excavations here for the past 3 months in the interest of the World's Fair, have just made one of the richest finds of the century in the way of prehistoric remains. These gentlemen have confided their excavations to the Hopewell Farm, 7 miles from here, upon which are located some 20-odd Indian mounds. Within the interior, says here, of the Hopewell earthwork was the largest mound within its earthen enclosure. On Saturday, they were at work on a mound 500 feet in length, 200 feet wide, and 26 feet in height. At the depth of 14 feet, near the center of the mound, they exhumed the massive skeleton of a man, which was encased in a veritable copper armor. The head was covered by an oval-shaped copper cap. The jaws had copper molding, and the arms were dressed in copper. Copper plates covered the chest and stomach. On each side of the head, on protruding sticks, were wooden antlers, ornaments with copper. The mouth was stuffed with genuine pearls of immense size, but much decayed by the ravages of time. Around the neck was a necklace of bear's teeth set with pearls. At the side of the male skeleton was also found a female skeleton, the two being supposed to be man and wife. It is estimated that the bodies were buried where they were found fully 600 years ago. Messrs. Moorhead and Cresson considered this find one of the most important ones they have yet made, and believe they have found the king of the mound builders. All right, continuing, it says here, Lewiston Evening Journal, October 11th, 1898, one of Ohio's first citizens. Workmen engaged in excavating and grading Jefferson Ave in Chillicothe, Ohio last week discovered a human skeleton which had been buried in a sitting posture facing the east, the knees being drawn up under the chin and clasped by the arms. The top of the skull was about 2.5 feet below the surface, and the whole rested on a single layer of granite boulders, varying in size from 3 to 6 inches in diameter, and forming an elliptical pavement 2 by 4 feet, with the major axis lying east to west. This pavement of boulders rested on a layer burned earth, ashes, and charcoal about 12 inches deep. Buried with the skeletons were found the bones of a bird of prey, either of a hawk or an eagle, but no stone implements of any description were found. The discovery was made in the second terrace or bottom of the Scioto River, about 20 feet above the low water mark. The soil consisted of a layer of about 18 inches of sandy loam, overlying a bed of coarse dry gravel of unknown depth, which accounts for the preservation of the bones. No particular care was exercised by the workmen in excavating the bones, and they were badly broken, the skull having been crushed by blow from a pick. A careful inspection of the skeleton would indicate that of a man at least 7 feet in height, with nearly round head, the facial angle being 78 degrees, as could be determined. The discovery of this skeleton recalls to mind an extensive ancient earthwork on this site, and now almost entirely obliterated, which originally enclosed over 80 acres within its walls, it as one of that class designated as sacred enclosures. Says here, Daily Newburgh Journal, October 26, 1898. There have been unearthed at Chillicothe, Ohio, three monster skeletons. They were found in the neighborhood of what was at one time one of the most important earthworks of the mound builders. The skeletons, which were those of men over 7 feet height, were found in various postures, and it is supposed they fell either defending or attacking the earthworks and were buried with military honors. And this picture says one of five identical earthen ceremonial centers located around Chillicothe, Ohio. Each side of the square was 80 feet in length, or 1,080 feet in length. The burial mounds excavated are shown in the upper left portion of the map. It says La Abelle de la Nouvelle Orleans, November 15th, 1898. Unearthed skeletons. Interesting discovery by street graders at Chillicothe, Ohio. Bones of prehistoric warriors are unearthed, belong to the race which built the big mounds, were giants in size. 3 skeletons of prehistoric warriors have been unearthed in Chillicothe, Ohio. It was while cutting down and grading some streets in the eastern portion of the town that the bones were brought to light, and their discovery has been received with the greatest of interest. Ages and ages ago, a great entrenchment was erected on the west bank of the Scioto River by the mound builders. It consisted of 2 circles and a square, joined by a passageway. The smaller circle was 800 feet in diameter. The larger one was 1,720 feet, and the square contained 27 acres of land. The walls encircling this great space were 40 feet high and nearly as thick as the bottom. It must have required almost inconceivable labor to throw up those mighty walls with the implements then in use. But within a radius of a few miles, no less than 5 of these great fortifications, ceremonial centers, all exactly the same shape and size, were erected, and traces of them still exist. And here's an image that says the mound near Londonderry is still visible, although reduced by excavations. The Washington Post, December 4th, 1898. Dug up skeleton 8 feet long. A remarkable prehistoric skeleton was unearthed the other day by Mr. R.A. Tomlinson on the bank of Owl Creek, a little stream near Londonderry, Ohio. Mr. Tomlinson was engaged digging into a gravel bed and had penetrated about 4 feet below the surface when he discovered the bones. The skeleton, which was exceedingly preserved, was lying at full length on the left side, with its left hand under it. When lifted up, the hand was found to hold a dozen darts of the finest workmanship, but it was the size of the skeleton that amazed those who saw it. When measured, it was found to be only about an inch short of 8 feet in length, and there can be no doubt that in life the man was fully 8 feet in height, and probably an inch more than that. The bones were massive, showing that the man was a giant in strength as well as stature. The skull was a third larger than an average human skull, and the lower jaw was abnormal in size and thickness. Hundreds of people have viewed the skeletons, and it will doubtless be preserved as a curiosity. Continuing, it says here, burial mound in Chillicothe, Ohio. That's the picture right there. Not the best quality. It says Ohio Archaeological and Historical Quarterly, 1899. 2 tumuli or mounds upon the farm of Mr. M.V. Briggs, 4 miles north of Chillicothe, in the southeast corner of Union Township, were explored. They are ranged north and south, about 100 feet apart, upon the second terrace of the Scioto. The south mound is 7 feet high and 75 feet base. The north one 10 feet high and 70 feet base. Both have sandy clay top and black soil in the lower sections. The southern tumulus had been farmed over for many years. The other was more nearly in its original condition. We threshed the south mound thoroughly, found the skull of a skeleton north of the center and within 2 feet of the surface. Nothing else save a few worked pieces of flint came to light during our digging. The other bones of the skeleton could not be found. We dug a pit in the south mound 20 feet long, 15 feet wide, and 11 feet deep. 2 feet from the south edge of the mound, we found a skeleton headed west and fairly well preserved. 1 foot north of this lay another headed west but not very well preserved. Near it, we found a celt. 7 feet deep and 25 feet north of the south edge, I found a large burned red sandstone relic of unknown use. The celt and ashes covered bones are shown in Figure 10, numbers 8, 17, and 18. Near these was a third body headed east. These three were in a row, although they headed differently. 5 feet deep, in the central part of the structure, we found a fourth skeleton. The bones were the largest I ever removed from a mound. All joints were exceedingly massive, and the muscular attachments were wonderfully developed. Badly decayed as it was, the longer bones were sound enough for me to make these observations. Another body lay beyond this one, and 5 feet below the central skeleton, we found another buried in a large bed of ashes. They were perfectly white and appeared very pure. They were 6 to 7 inches thick and covered the entire body, preserving it in good shape, save the skull was fractured. Continuing, we got this image here. It says large burial mound in Chillicothe, Ohio. Looks partially destroyed. Prehistoric America, 1911. So that's the source, right? So it says under a mound at Chillicothe, the skeleton was discovered of a very tall woman who died young. Her teeth were all intact, and at her feet lay the bones of a child. Beneath these human remains was greasy black earth, in which the microscope has revealed remains of animal matter and heaps of cinders. Further excavations brought to light a great many other bones. It is uncertain whether they were those of unfortunates offered up in sanguinary rites or merely of those whose remains had been subjected to cremation as a mark of respect. All the bodies lay on the left side, and by each one was placed a vessel full of food, which would hardly have been provided for victims. These are very characteristic funeral rites. Right? Says here, skull from a burial mound south of Chillicothe, described as being of unusually large size. And it says here, a standard history of Ross County, Ohio, Volume 1, 1917. It is worthy of note that one of the most perfect skulls ever found in the mounds, and one which incontestably belonged to the race who built the earthworks, was discovered in a singularly constructed mound upon the summit of High Hill, which overlooks the valley of Scioto, and is situated 4 miles below Chillicothe, upon the west side of the river. This skull, described by Professor Morton in his elaborate work, Crania Americana, was of unusually large size and exhibited a facial angle of 81 degrees. The internal capacity of the skull was 90 cubic inches, 7 inches greater than the mean capacity of the Mongolian skull, 3 inches greater than the Caucasian, and 8 inches greater than that of the American Indian. All right. So again, this skull made it into the book Crania Americana, a very scholarly book, regarding the studies of craniology, right? That's what that's their go-to, Crania Americana. But even him is saying, look, this was a real skull found in a mound. It's not a forgery. It's a real giant. He was, observing and studying. It says here, New York Times, August 29th, 1932. Giant skeletons found. Chillicothe, Ohio, May 31st. 10 skeletons were found in 2 mounds by Dr. Love Berry, curator of the Ohio State University Museum. One that of a giant, fully 8 feet tall. It is the most notable find yet. It says here, History of Chillicothe County, 1946. Near Plainfield, about 1840, Mr. J.D. Workman opened a small earthen mound on his place. He found nothing except several stone relics. Another, about 2 miles below, was excavated some 10 years later by Wesley Patrick. It contained a few bones belonging to the giant human skeleton, including the skull, jawbone, and thigh. These were of an unusual large size and indicated the skeleton to be fully 7 feet in length. Continuing, History of Chillicothe County, 1946. Large human skeleton uncovered in stone mound. 54 years ago, A stone mound was opened on a hilltop near the colonel's house, Colonel P. Metham's. A rock pile 18 feet square and 5 feet deep, composed of sandstone layers, was removed, revealing a sepulchre floored with a large flat sandstone and walled with sandstone slabs. On the floor lay part of a skull, a thigh bone, teeth, and a few other fragments of a skeleton. The thigh bone indicated the dead to have been unusual height, more than 7 feet. All right. And we go on to Vinton County, says here, burial mound in Vinton County within the Soleski National Forest. And that's the image right there. The Weekly News, Mansfield, Ohio, December 3rd, 1891. Near Hamden Junction, Ohio, workmen at the Roscoe Mound unearthed a gigantic skeleton encased in a copper covering. All right, copper covering. And then we move on. That was the report. And then Warren County says here the Serpentine Mounds to the west of the Stubbs earthwork were the site of the discovery of the giant woman skeleton. The Middleton, Ohio Daily News Signal from March 21st, 1908. Skeleton of giant Indians found in gravel bank on Warren County farm. Yesterday, when digging into a gravel bank on his farm near Stubbtown in Warren County, John Watkins discovered the burial grounds. The skeleton of a huge woman was unearthed. It measured 7 feet and 5 inches in length. About her neck were ropes of pearls. Listen, pearled out, right? And in her tomb, other articles of value. Much excitement was aroused among the farmers in the vicinity, and further excavation brought to light many other skeletons of this extinct race. Many more like her. Some were found in sitting positions and some on their faces. Watkins will try to interest the Ohio Archaeological Society in his find. All right, a giant woman with pearl necklace. We move on to Washington County. We're still in Ohio here in this chapter of this book. Travels in America, 1806. All right, all these sources, you can verify all this stuff. Directly across the Muskingum could be seen Marietta. Her gardens, poplar trees, shipyards, public buildings, and her highly cultivated plains, extending in a narrow breadth along the Ohio, many interesting miles. After a very short inspection and cursory examination, it was very evident that the spot on which I stood had been occupied by the Indians, either as a place of observation or a stronghold. The exact summit of the hill I found to be artificial. It expressed an oval, agreeing with the natural form of the foundation, 45 feet by 23, and was composed apparently of earth and stone, though no stone of a similar character appeared near. The base of the oval was girded by a wall in a state of too great decay to justify any calculation, and the whole was so covered with heavy timber and a bed of such thick bars that I despaired of gaining any farther knowledge and would have instantly left the place had I not been detained by Cuff. So basically, he's saying he was in top of this mountain overlooking, the city or the valley or Marietta or whatever, and he didn't know he was on a mound. So this guy named Cuff said, whom I saw occupied in endeavoring to introduce a pole in a small opening between two flags near the root of a tree which grew on the crown of the oval or summit of the hill. The flags were too heavy to be removed by the mere power of hands. 2 good oak posts were cut in lieu of levers and crowels. Clapping these into the orifice first discovered, we weighed a large flagstone, and on tilting it over, we each assumed a guard and waited a few moments, in silent and expectation of hearing the hissing of vermin or the rustling of beasts. Nothing was heard. We resumed our labor, cast out a number of stones, leaves, and earth, and cleared a surface 7 feet by 5, which had been covered upwards of 15 inches deep with flat stones, principally lying on each other with their edges pointing above the horizon. The surface we had cleared offered insuperable difficulties. It was a plain superficies, composed of but 3 stones of such apparent magnitude that Cuffs began to think we should find under them. The manner the stones were placed led me to conceive the existence of a vault filled with the riches of antiquity. or crowded with the treasures of the most ancient world. A bed of sand was all that appeared under the flags I cast off, and as I knew sand not to be nearer than the bed of Muskingum, a design was again so manifest as to encourage my proceeding, and the sand, which was about a foot deep, was soon removed. The design and labor of man was now unequivocal. The space out of which these materials were taken left a hollow and an oblong square, lined with stone on the edge and sides, and paved with square stones on the apparent bottom or upper surface, exactly fitting together, in diameter about 9 inches. I picked these up with the nicest care, and again came to a bed of sand, the removal of which left my vault, as is now evidently showed itself, near 3 feet deep, presenting another bottom or surface composed of small square cut stones fitted with such art that I had much difficulty in discovering many of the places where they met. These displaced, I came to a substance which on the most critical examination I judged to be a mat or mats in a state of entire decomposition and decay. Reverence and care increasing with this palpable powder with my hands, and fanned off the remaining dust with my hat. Grand was the reward of my persevering labor and strengthened hopes. There appeared before me, there existed under my feet, a beautiful pavement of small colored stones, the colors and stones arranged in such a manner as to express harmony in shades and to portray the full length of figure of a warrior, under whose feet a snake was exhibited in ample folds. You guys hear what they're finding right here, right? To tread on such exquisite beauty and workmanship formed by hands centuries ago and by the ancestors of a race of people now rejected and despised could not be done without an awful emotion. Like a miser, I was uninterrupted, led to my led to examine my treasure. I again descended into the vault, occupied with the desire of being able to separate the pavement in such a manner and to imprint on every stone such marks as would enable me to put it together at any future period and bring it home for the advantage and delight of the curious world. I had made but very little progress before I discovered the impracticability of my intention. No part of the pavement was exactly of the same character, except the space between the outlines of the figures and the sides and ends of the entire space. The body of the figures was composed of dyed woods, bone. Little more than the actual pavement could be preserved. It is composed of flat stones 1 inch deep, 2 inches square, and the prevailing colors are white, green, dark blue, and pale spotted red, all of which are peculiar to the lakes and not to be had nearer. They are evidently known and filled with a precision which proves them to have been but from one common example. The whole was affixed in a thin layer of sand which covered a large piece of beech bark in great decay, whose removal exposed what I was fully prepared to discover from all the previous indications, the remains of a human skeleton of uncommon magnitude, extended in a bark shell, which also contained an earthen urn, or rather pot of earthenware, which were several small broken bones and some white sediment. The vitrified rings, like a rummer glass, holds about 2 gallons, has a top or cover of the same material, and resists fire as completely as iron or brass. A stone hatchet with a groove round the pole by which it was fastened with a width to the handle. 24 arrow points made a flint and a bone, and lying in a position which betrayed their having belonged to a quiver. Quantity of beads, round, oval, and square, colored green, black, white, blue, and yellow. A conch shell decomposed into a substance like chalk. This shell is 14 inches long and 23 in circumference. Under a heap of dust and tenuous shreds of feathered cloth and hair, a parcel of brass rings cut by an art unknown to me out of a solid piece of that metal. Each ring is 3 inches in diameter and has a horizontal circumference, half an inch wide, on both sides of which are strongly edged, a variety of characters resembling Chinese, the deciphering of which my scanty erudition has no pretensions to reach. All right, so they're finding inscriptions here too. Of the skeletons, I have preserved a small part of the vertebral column, a portion of the skull, a part of the underjaw enclosed in two grinders of great size, the bones of the thighs and legs, and some metacarpals of the hands and feet, the ribs, clavicles, vertebra of the neck and spine, and were nearly an impalpable powder. Judging from comparison and analogy, the being to whom these remains belonged could not have been less than 7 foot high. That he was a king, a sakim or chief of a very remote period, there can be no manner of doubt. The distinction is ingenuity, labor, and care, which we or he was buried, and the mausoleum constructed for him alone, on an eminence above the multitude, and its disregarded dead proclaims this beyond dispute. And from the subjects found in the interments, the following, at least, and perhaps many more, useful conclusions may be drawn. That they knew the use and properties of brass is very clear, and that they could work it with skill is equally evident. 7. If the characters on the rings be in fact Chinese, or if they bear a strong and significant analogy to them, it again justifies the suspicion which formerly prevailed that a communication early existed between Asia and America. All right, again, we know it did, and they always see it in reverse. Since destroyed by some violent agitation of the earth at the Straits of Bering, or by a reverse climate which renders the passage inaccessible and too difficult and cold for the powers and temperament now accorded to man, if the characters on the rings be original and unknown to any other of the nations of the earth, it must show that the use of letters and the art of engraving were known to the American tribe. This is the true old world, many ages since, and also prove that when we speak of America as a new country on which science never shone, and in which social arts, agriculture, and commerce never flourished, we arrogate to ourselves more information than we are entitled to. All right, that's the hijack. That's what they literally teach people in school, that we were savages, they didn't know anything. This is a new world, right? And betray a presumption and ignorance for which we ought to blush. The remarkable size of the skeleton would signify that the Indians of every time were fond of associating in their chiefs physical as well as mental endowments. That this king should unite a gigantic form to wisdom and intrepidity of heart appears to have been ever their favorite principle. Even the few scattered nations which still remain, and whose monarchs are elective, betray this passion in their choice, and pay much more deference to a prince of inordinate stature than to one of a common magnitude. It continues, says here, Pittsburgh Daily Post, May 27th, 1891, reporting on the same area, says, while excavating for new school building at Marietta, Ohio, last week an Indian skeleton 7 feet tall was found. The bones were very large and the skull usually thick. A number of Indian beads and other relics were found in the grave. The skeleton was 8 feet below the surface of the ground. All right, and that was it. So we're gonna actually end it here, guys. I did a lot of reading today. I don't want to make these videos too long so people can actually sit through them. You know, we get a lot of new subscribers, so we definitely want to make sure people choose to at least try to check out the video, not make them too long so they don't even bother. But I hope you guys enjoyed the reading in general. As you guys can see, it just keeps going on and on and on and on, more and more and more and more reports. All these reports hidden from us in history, all these reports swept under the rug. All these people cannot just be making things up. And as you guys can see, there's sources for this, and a lot of these digs, these excavations were done by official archaeologists, Smithsonian Institute, and all these people, the anthropological societies, historical societies, and the local towns, all that. They can't say this was a prank. They even have these bones in museums. They're not saying they're fake. They just don't show them to the public, guys. They got them locked up. They don't want you to think about this. It's a lot. It's so many giant bones. We're talking about from 7 feet to 9 feet to 10 feet to 12 feet. All right, but you guys see how many videos I've done, and we've read so many reports. We've seen the original newspaper reports. We've read actual books that they're sourcing here, telling us. All right, but again, a lot in Ohio, I think in the next chapter of this book, it goes into Indiana, so we're going to read a little bit about that as well. Some of the mounds and giants found there. We'll also get back into the other book a little bit more. We're going to continue reading as many books on giants as we can. No worries, guys. This is a very good topic. And just try to show that this is more actual historic than just like a myth or a legend or just, a fantasy, a fairy tale, right? Giants were real. If you don't know by now, I mean, I don't know what you just hear. You think all these people are just making all this up, all these excavations, what the Smithsonian did, all these photos. This was real, guys. People really that tall, 7 to 8 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet, 11 feet, 12 feet. I mean, Tuscaloosa was most likely 7 to 8 footer. Tuscaloosa. All right, we know that. All right. But once again, thanks for hearing me read this long to you and sticking around to the end. I appreciate you guys for doing that, having the patience for that, and the discipline and the interest. I love it that you want to learn, you want me to keep reading. That motivates me to keep going, putting out this information and getting into these books and these discoveries and research that has gone on before that nobody really told us about, right? But thank you once again. Shout out to all the members of the channel. Shout out to all my Patreons. Shout out to all the moderators, all the longtime supporters following me all these years. Appreciate you guys for holding me up. Thank you once again. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa.